Welcome into the Alvernia Football Coaches Show here at Alvernia, leading up to kickoff today on the road at Fairleigh Dickinson Florham, a MAC battle between the Golden Wolves and the Devils of FDU. You're listening or watching on YouTube across the Jacob Media Sports Radio Network on Sports Radio 1240, your home for Alvernia Golden Wolves football. I'm Matt Murphy, joined by my radio analyst, Bernie Nowatarski, and your radio analyst, I guess you should say, if you're a Golden Wolves fan out there. And, of course, every week we are joined by head coach Ralph Clark on the Coaches Show. Thanks, as always, Coach, for joining us. Week 9 edition of the show. It seems like this season has gone by in the blink of an eye, but we appreciate the time, as always. How's this week been for you away from the field, just in general? How are things?
Away from the field?
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
You don't know what that is?
We're good.
We have plenty of time to get into the football stuff, but everything's good?
Everything's good. Wife
week
is
9
good.
already.
Kids are good. It's week 9. It's amazing that it's here already. It seems like we were just in here doing the preseason show, and now we're winding down with 2 games left. So,
doesn't it feel like it went kind of fast, Bernie, this year? Quicker than last year almost.
Thinking about it already.
I don't know if it was because of the later season bye. During the late season bye, it felt like we hadn't seen Coach for a while and everybody for a little while. Last year, the excitement of the first win and then an early season bye, and then it was like the gauntlet of the rest of the season. So maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, I was just thinking back. I was trying to remember the New England game, and it doesn't even register right now. It seems like it was a couple months ago.
Also different that we had both non-conference games out of the way early this year. There's no road trip looming on the road. We're recording this on Thursday, but on the road today against FDU, and then coming back home to wrap things up with Misericordia. But we will go back to Week 8 here in this first segment and talk about last week's game against a Del Val squad that came in highly touted, and the first half was close, and that's where we want to start things right here in this segment. But we also will get into this week's matchup against FDU. We'll talk about some statistics from the season since we are later in the season, and we will talk more at the end about the Golden Wolves in the community. If you've been listening to this show, we've talked about Bernie's involvement with that and Coach's involvement in the players and how that all came together. So we'll put a little bit of a bow on that here on the Alvernia Football Coaches Show across the Jacob Media Sports Radio Network. But, Coach, Del Val came in, whatever polls you want to look at. Everyone knows they're a ranked team. It was 7-0 at halftime here. I say here, we're on the road today, but at Alvernia in the home stadium in front of your home crowd. And you had the pace, at least from what we thought, kind of where you wanted it at that point. So what did you make of the first half on Saturday against Del Val?
Well, you're correct. We were able to stick to the game plan, which obviously offensively was possess the ball, control the clock, be very mindful of the clock, with snap count and things of that nature, convert some first downs, and more importantly, establish the run. We were going to try to run the ball, which is, I think, something that people try to get away from when they play them. And we said, hey, we're going to run right at them and see what happens. And that was offensively, and defensively, it was, hey, let's withstand the storm. They have a tendency to come out with unbalanced with some formation, try to formation you with the play calling. They surprised us a little bit and went in the air, which is a little different for them. It's a lot different for them, actually. But we were able to bend and not break, getting the turnovers on the first 2 possessions, and playing some really gritty defense and going in at half at 7-0, obviously. And we really missed out on a couple opportunities. The first drive with the dig route, and Jared, he kind of put the cart before the horse, tries to turn up field before we actually catch the ball. That had the potential to be a really big play for us. And so we missed out on a couple opportunities to put some points on the board in the first half. But overall play, I thought we rose to the occasion, and maybe a little bit more so than anybody thought we would, especially considering a highly touted ranked opponent. We played physical football, and we were pleased. And coming out for the second half, we thought we had the momentum, and then we have what happened at the start of the second half. So, but first half, I think with the exception of missing out on the opportunity to put points on the board, we did exactly what we wanted to do.
Yeah, and you mentioned the drive that was halted because of the drop, and I remember saying to Bernie that the Del Val defense, with all these big numbers on their defensive line and all that, seemed like they had risen to the occasion a little bit even at that point in the ball game, and he kind of corrected me and said, hey, if that ball's caught, they keep rolling. So that was a half where you guys were right in it with them. Bernie, whether it was the first half or the game at large, what were your takeaways from this past Saturday's game against the Aggies?
Well, like Coach just said, it definitely was a game of two halves. They would have. I know he certainly would like to have seen some points from the offense in that first half. The defense, you couldn't ask them to do much more than they did. I mean, to keep a nationally ranked team out of in the end zone, I said if they score once every 20 minutes was about what their pace was. I said this is going to be a heck of a game if they can keep them out the way they did. And I thought the kids played a really intense first half.
The stops inside the 10-yard line, multiple, 3 of them, as we pointed out. I think that was the total number in the first half inside the 10. A couple of turnovers created. What did you think about those plays?
The turnovers were huge. And then, like Coach said about the running game, I know you and I both said we had more yards against them in the first half than they had given up.
They only averaged about 30 rushing yards against per game.
And we were already over 50 or 60.
Yeah.
And what I kind of noticed, if I was correct, you ran right at those DNs.
Absolutely.
The kids that really are playmakers, but they make a lot of plays coming from behind, and you went right at them. And that's where, the run game, there was some success early. The second half is just one of those things. Again, I know you don't want to hear too often about how young you guys are, but that was a young group. Mistakes that happened in the second half. And I said to you, Matt, on that opening kickoff, when he fielded it and dropped it into the end zone and now you've got to bring it out, I said, that's a miserable start, and it really got no better.
Coach Bernie just mentioned some things about the second half, but what were some of the things that made the difference in the second half, in your opinion?
He hit the nail on the head, young mistakes. When you don't possess the ball, so he muffed it, it went into the end zone, you can take a knee, and we would have had possession at the 25, which our off returner was saying stay, and he just that's a young mistake. And so we start on the 2-yard line, we fumble, there's the we get the safety, and then we kick it to them, we get the bad punt and going offsides, and so that gives them an additional 5 yards and they score, and so that just starts getting the ball rolling in the wrong direction. And the defense, we played tough there here and there, and then but giving up an offensive touchdown to their defense didn't help. So, and then the punt return for the touchdown. So, defensively, you're not too upset. We should have played a lot better in the second half. In the pass defense, I think we gave up 300 yards for maybe the second time this season in the air, and then they didn't rush the ball very much against us. I think we gave up a total of 100 yards or 102 yards rushing, somewhere in there. So we played pretty good, pretty physical against the run. You would have expected us to play better in the pass and tackle better. So we made young mistakes in the second half that you can't afford to make against any team, much less a talented nationally ranked team, if you want to compete. So we've got to learn from those mistakes and kind of move forward now.
Matt Murphy and Bernie Nowatarski talking with Alvernia head football coach Ralph Clark here on the Alvernia Football Coaches Show across the Jacob Media Sports Radio Network, right here on, of course, Sports Radio 1240. Rolling on in this first segment, we talk about the youth coach, and we've talked a lot about penalties. I know you don't want to hear it, but 14 in this game. So how impactful do you think penalties and turnovers on the other side of that, because you guys forced some, but you had some of your own. So just those types of things, how important do you think that was in the game? Because Bernie and I mentioned at the start, the pregame show, playing a clean game is what you have to do against a team like that, kind of to start the process of staying in it versus them.
Well, I think that goes into the tale of two halves. I think we played a fairly clean first half, and when you mentioned the penalties, the bulk of those penalties in the second half where we're frustrated, they started to pressure us a little bit more, and our kids panic. Get into a panic mode. Not wanting to make a mistake. That's when you make your most mistakes, and a lot of those coming from holding penalties or what have you up front. I think we had one retaliatory penalty. We were retaliating against something that was done early, but the second guy always gets caught.
There was some chippiness, to say the least, on Saturday.
Well, I mean, if you're the number 10 or 13, 10 to 12 team in the country, and you have these, for lack of a better term, these nobodies is what we're looked at. These young kids who come in and they're not scared and they're not backing down and they're giving you a game and they're playing with effort. You're going to be a little upset if it's you only score 7 points and a half.
I said to Matt, they came out for the second half with 7 minutes on the clock. I said their halftime speech was very short, very loud, very direct, and ended because they were out warming up before 7 minutes on the clock. Mm-hmm. So I imagine they went in, and I'm pretty sure I know what was said, and we won't repeat it here. But basically, you're playing a 2-win team. We're 14 ranked, and we're sitting here with 7 points, and they're getting the ball. There would have been a lot more expletives in there, but I'm pretty sure their halftime speech was very quick and direct.
I mean, I feel like this entire segment has been about this first half, but it was an entertaining half of football against a team that is having success against everybody, and especially in the conference, a record-long conference winning streak in the MAC, almost 30 games at this point. So rightfully so, we're going to talk about a one-score game through a full half of football on your home field. So what was the energy like in your locker room then, and then what was the message after the game, after the entirety of it had unfolded?
Well, at the halftime, obviously it's positive energy. You're down 7-0, and obviously missed the opportunity to put points on the board ourselves. So I think at that point we might have held them to the fewest amount of points they've had all season and a half. So
I'm sure that's right. I don't even need to fact check that one.
Right. So you're feeling pretty good about yourselves and understanding that you get the ball back. So it's very positive energy. We're trying to clean some things up. Kids are excited to get back out on the field. And then, we had the second half, and we just had too many mistakes. And after the game, obviously, there was some things that we had to handle that didn't have anything to do with the game. But then the message to the team was, one, I'm proud of you. Because as everybody's gotten a chance to see, like, we don't back down and we don't quit. And that's just, I think, what everybody's gotten used to seeing. So I'm very proud of them for not backing down. I'm very proud of the effort they put forth, in particular in the first half. But we've got to learn. This is another one of the growing pains, and we've got to learn from the mistakes. The penalties have to cease. The effort, the preparation has to increase, and we've got to, for lack of a better term, be locked in for 60 minutes, not 30. Not 30, not 45. We've got to be locked in for 60 minutes because I think everybody's seen us play a half of football. They've seen us play 2 quarters of football or 3 quarters of football. We haven't played 4 quarters of football yet. So that's the message. But we're very capable, very, very capable.
Absolutely. And before we move on to the next segment, we'll talk about some individuals, some stats on the other side. But Bernie and I mentioned kind of the linebacking core has stood out. Obviously, in any defense, they're going to be the guys near the top in most defenses and tackles and things like that. But it seems like those are your leaders for a lot of them as well. And some of the other guys are stepping up. And I wanted to mention Jaden Hyman. It seems like he's kind of been in the mix the last few weeks. And obviously Tajon Witten entered the last game with 20 more tackles than anybody else in your defense. So what have you made of your linebackers over the last few weeks?
I think that's well, you're right. They're the leaders of our defense. The one thing you can't forget is our defensive front. The way that our defense is set up for our defense linebackers to make plays. Our D-line's job is to protect our linebackers, and our linebackers are pretty darn good athletes. We've got former wide receivers and what have you. So we have really good athletes at the linebacker position, and so we're geared towards those guys making plays. And when we try to put them in a position to make plays, and they've done a good job. Tajon obviously I think he might be the 3rd leading tackler in the conference, somewhere around in there, which probably for him after the start that he had last year is a down year for him. He does a great job of getting us lined up. Making the right checks, even when it's not his job to make the checks. I think he has a good understanding of what we're trying to get accomplished, and he sets everyone else up for success. And I think everybody else feeds off him, and we play a lot more confident with him on the field, which was this case last year. And Jaden Hyman, he does a great job coming in, learning. He hasn't played linebacker before, and this is his first season. And I think he feeds off of Tajon and the energy that he has. And he comes in. Those guys come in and they watch film every day. Those guys are in our offices all the time, and I think that's what you see on the field is a product of that preparation and the time that they put in, and it enables them to play fast and physical and make plays.
More to come with Alvernia head football coach Ralph Clark. We'll go behind the numbers, or we'll go by the numbers in the next segment here on the Alvernia Football Coaches Show across the Jacob Media Sports Radio Network on Sports Radio 1240. We're taking you up to kickoff between Alvernia and FDU Florham at the top of the hour on Sports Radio 1240, your home for Alvernia Golden Wolves football. Welcome back to the Alvernia Football Coaches Show across the Jacob Media Sports Radio Network on Sports Radio 1240, your home for Alvernia Golden Wolves football. Today, the Golden Wolves on the road at the top of the hour, taking on the FDU Florham Devils, one of these teams looking for win number 3 on the season. As we continue on with our Week 9 edition of the Coaches Show, the pregame show today, preceding the game action in the Middle Atlantic Conference. I'm Matt Murphy alongside Bernie Nowatarski and Alvernia head football coach Ralph Clark. We talked about last week's game. We will look ahead shortly to today's opponent, FDU, and we'll have some fun towards the end as we always do. But I want to do our By the Numbers segment, the stats that you don't care about that you make sense of for the fans out there. And there's one that if MAC fans or fans of any team in the conference are aware of, they'll see your name at the top, and that's rushing yards per game as a team. So, and it's an impressive stat, 171 rushing yards per game for Alvernia. Obviously, Malcolm Carey has a lot to do with that. 20 yards more than the second highest rushing yards per game team in the league, Misericordia, your opponent next week. So, Coach Clark and Bernie, you're going to jump in as well with the run game, and it's Week 9, so we've seen it, and we've seen it all year long, and we talked about how you wanted to go to it early last week. So what have you seen in the running game, and how have you been able to have that success on the ground?
Well, it's no big secret once you put on the film, it's the versatility in the running game. And, yes, Malcolm does lead our team in rushing, but the guy handing the ball off to him has a big he plays a big part in our ability to run the game and possess the ball. Darius Sample does a great job, and he adds a different dynamic to our offense, which is some of the things that I talked about before the season started and early on in the season. So having the ability to run the ball, even when it is Darius, kind of makes his job throwing the ball a little bit easier. Now, we've played some really tough defenses here as of late, so we haven't been able to, put that part on display as much. But, I think we've been pretty good at rushing the ball and possessing the ball all season, and Malcolm and Darius have been the biggest parts of that.
Bernie, 170-plus rushing yards per game for this Alvernia team this year. And as Coach said, when you have a quarterback who racks up a bunch of rushing yards himself, that has a lot to do with it. But Malcolm as well, a first-team All-MAC performer a year ago. So they're dynamic and they're versatile.
Well, Malcolm makes quite a few runs. He takes care of himself. It'll be an inside zone, and he'll bounce it out and hit the corner and turn what looked like maybe a 1-yard gain into a 9-yard gain. So he does a lot on his own as well. Darius certainly on the game days when we talk, and I say, now that was an RO. There was no P in there because, he was either going to give it to Darius or he was going to pull it. Darius was going to give it to Malcolm or pull it and keep it himself. So those two combined puts us stress on a defense. And I had said earlier in the season, I thought if we could pass, it would open which is usually the opposite. If you can run, then you can pass later. But I thought if we could pass early, it would open that run up. And I'd say that's probably switched itself now that the run is getting developed early in the game, and then those little short passes and the things that, are much better than last year's, because I think our balance between pass and run is really, much better and getting better every week. But those two, you try and stop one, you've got to worry about the other, and then you throw his arm into it, and it opens the passing game up, and it just makes for a much more potent offense.
We got to get to the bottom of something here, Coach. When it is 3rd and long, it ends up being Darius Sample escaping the pocket and running and reaching the ball out 1 yard past the line to reach. What is the story behind him making something out of nothing this year and rushing for these 3rd and 15 conversions, 3rd and 16? He has countless runs of 16, 17, 18, 20 yards this season. What's the story behind that?
That's Darius.
Here's
what I'll tell you, and Darius, first of all, Darius is a great kid, period. You take football out, he's a great kid and a great human being. But Darius is very, very confident. And there's not a time, and I don't care who it is, where he steps on the field and he doesn't, in his mind, say, I'm the best darn athlete on this field. period, hands down. And so when there is no play to be made, then the best athlete's going to go make a play. And in his mind, which sometimes gets us in trouble, so you could talk about, we rushed for over 100 yards last week, but we didn't end up with over 100 yards rushing.
You may have had as many backwards.
He drops back pretty deep on a lot of plays. And it's
the ad-lib.
It gets dangerous sometimes.
I said to Matt, I don't know if you saw it on film, but the one time he dropped back, by the time he was done drifting back, it was about 30 yards.
Yeah.
And then he
ran 30.
Ran and got the first down. It was about a 65-yard run for a 12-yard gain.
Yeah. But you know what? That's what you live with. You live with it. I don't think anybody is going to complain on our team. We'll live with the losses. You want them to be a little bit smarter with the ball and throwing it away, so you save field position. But how many times have you seen them hold on to it, and all of a sudden it's a 20-yard gain in the first down and the sticks move? So that's just Darius being Darius. And you know what? You just like to say that it's part of your offense and it's part of who we are right now.
Yeah, I wanted to touch base just a little from what you were talking about earlier with the penalties. I had said pregame I expected to see holding penalties just because of the pressure the type of pressure that they brought. So that didn't disturb me that much. I know the extracurricular ones bother every coach, but some of that is caused also by Darius and his running around. And at that point, a lineman's protecting him, so you're going to get holding calls on some of those scrambles and the things that happen. But there's no doubt if he's in open field, it's going to be a problem for somebody.
Yeah, and it's not about being cocky, but I'm going to take our athlete over your athlete.
And if you just look at the timing of a lot of these big plays, they're in a lot of time in bigger moments of the game, later in the game, things like that. So
right.
We've definitely seen him kind of take that mentality of considering himself maybe the best athlete on the field or what have you, like you just said, Coach. Talking with Alvernia head football coach Ralph Clark, I'm Matt Murphy alongside Bernie Nowatarski. We're here on the Alvernia football coaches show leading up to kickoff today at Fairleigh Dickinson Florham with your Golden Wolves in action in Week 9. And, Coach, as we're going by the numbers, flipping it to the defense, teams have, we talk about your rushing success, teams have had success rushing the ball against you guys as well. We don't need to give the specific number, but what have you thought about the balance? Because this leads into our discussion of FDU in the next segment, the balance between run and pass in terms of your opponents this season.
Well, I think last week was the first week where we saw more pass, which, like I said, was surprising for a rushing team to kind of attack us through the air like that. But
might be a nice preview of what's to come this week.
It could be, but this is a team that likes to put the ball in the air. But they're very. I will say this: they do a really good job, and they are very talented at the running back position. They have another quarterback that they're putting back there that's a really good athlete as well. That's different from the starter that they had for the first portion of the season. So the run pass balance. Honestly, teams have been pretty balanced in their play selection. With us, it's been a missed rush fit there or late in the game, and you're running the ball against us. If you look at halftime, we're usually doing a pretty good job, and then you get to later in the game, and I don't make excuses. We got to play better, but that's the young and underdeveloped kids. Our kids need to be in the weight room. That's obviously coming in the off season or what have you, and we've got to get bigger, faster, stronger. So that's just one of our deficiencies. So that's what I attribute the rushing stats to. In the pass-wise, if you look at it, we're one of the top teams in the conference, and that's somewhere where you can compete without the physicality some of the time. So, and I'd like to think that we have just as good as athletes as most people who are going to play. So our guys on the back end do a great job of competing. Miles Brody is, I would say, as a freshman right now, is probably one of the top corners, defensive backs in the league. For a freshman, he's doing outstanding. He's got a long way to go developmentally, but he's performing. So I think that's why you see what you see in the statistics when you talk about run versus pass.
Bernie, obviously your specialty being the secondary. Christian Sloan recovered a fumble in the last game. He went back to safety. Miles Brody has some gaudy numbers in the Alvernia secondary as a freshman cornerback with some length, and we talked a lot about him earlier in the season. Now, later in the season, what are your thoughts on the Golden Wolves secondary and how they've impacted games?
I think the secondary's overall for the season has played pretty well. I mean, they've made obviously some communication mistakes here and there. Last week, Del Val seemed to want to attack that side area, and they were more than willing to throw the little 8-yard out and take whatever yardage it was versus going straight down field. But I think the secondary's done well. And I mean, they've got picks, they've got breakdowns or knockdowns. They've done a real nice job. The linebacker crew plays downhill, and the running statistic sometimes is one of those variables that may be a lot of yardage, but again, my thing on last weekend, I said, as long as this defense bends but doesn't break, it doesn't matter how many yards they rush for. I mean, they weren't putting the ball in the end zone, but once every 20 minutes, and that against a ranked team keeps you in a ball game. And a lot of times the defense, if the offense is struggling and the defense is out on the field too long, that's where that wear down comes in the second half. When they're on the field a little too long, and then there was some breakdown in tackles. There was a little bit of case of bad tackling that went on late in the game, and I think a lot of that comes down to them being tired and wore down. So that's where statistics sometimes get piled up a little bit. But we've had an awful lot of times this year where teams are in 3rd and 9. Long distant third downs, and it's because we've stopped the run. So I don't let that statistic get to me too much. And the secondary, if you gave up 300 yards, but there's only 7 points on the board, I mean, then they needed 301, I guess.
Right.
We're talking about a lot of team stats, and we'll wrap up this segment not with a number, not a specific number, but I'm looking at the defense, 52 tackles for loss. I'm not going to ask directly about it. Just kind of everything we've talked about as a whole. What was like the emphasis coming off last week's game as we transition to talking about next week's game, whether it was a position group or a side of the ball? What were some of the emphases in practice this past week?
With us, it's just attention to detail, and it wasn't about. And I'll say this: one thing we don't do is point the finger.
Right.
Whether it's offense, defense, the D line, linebackers, secondary. We don't do that.
Gotcha.
We talk about the whole because it's about all of us. If one side of the ball is having a rough day, then the other side of the ball needs to pick it up, or the kicking game needs to pick it up. So we take it all as all of us. What do we need to do as a team? And across the board, offense, defense, kicking game is just paying attention to the details, being focused, and like I mentioned earlier, putting together 60 minutes of football because we haven't done that. So we need to be more detailed in our run fits. We need to be have better eye discipline on the back end and at the second level in defending the pass. And that because that attributes to some of that yardage that we gave up if we're making the right checks and we're making the right communication calls, and some of that stuff doesn't happen. If we tackle better,
right.
we don't give up. We give up a screen for a big touchdown, and we give up on the first play of the game where we don't tackle. Now they've got less than 200 yards passing. So it's the little things that matter. And that can affect, and like Bernie just said, those little things affect the game, and they can make 2 plays can all of a sudden give you gaudy stats when really that's not the tail of the tape.
I think you're secretly a stats guy. You've known a lot about these numbers tonight. I mean, you're the coach, obviously, but
I think I get paid to pay attention.
Yeah,
you know
what I mean. Like I feel like you're more specific this week with some of them. So
there's plays that repeat in your head through the course of the week.
Yeah.
After a game, and and you and I did say it at halftime. Take away the 2 big plays in the first half, and their yardage was really minimal.
Yeah. That was one of only 2 catches, I think, for the big tight end as well. The first one of the game. Before we move on, Coach, any new mottos this week, or is it the same old mottos heading into FDU today?
3P.
3P?
Yeah. 3P.
What about
just getting back to basics?
Hit the gas?
Hit the gas. I mean, it's all of that.
3P encapsulates everything.
Everything. It's taken everything that we've learned throughout the course of the week. Now let's put it together. Let's be 1-0 this week. I will say that's the thing. This week was 1-0. Let's be 1-0 in our meetings, and we're paying attention to detail. Let's be 1-0 in the classroom. Let's be 1-0 in the film room. Let's be 1-0 on the practice field, and let's come out and be 1-0 on Saturday. And if we do those things and we have that, that's 1-0 every play. this play, let's be 1-0. All right, now next play. All right, this play, let's be 1-0. And if we do that and we can keep the focus for that, football is a game where you got to pay attention. You got to give maximum effort for 6 seconds at a pop. If we can do that 6 seconds at a time for 60 minutes, we're going to be okay.
I love it.
The greatest football speech to me yet is in Any Given Sunday when Al Pacino says there's inches all over the field, and when you grab that inch, that one,
fight for that inch.
That's the one that gives me goosebumps because it really is. It comes down to a game of inches, and sometimes you go back through a game and you'd say, give me those 2 plays back and we've got to win.
Yep.
All right, well, we'll find out. We're taking you up to kickoff between Alvernia and FDU Florham on Sports Radio 1240 across the Jacob Media Sports Radio Network. More to come on the other side. Rolling along the second half of the Alvernia Football Coaches Show across the Jacob Media Sports Radio Network on, of course, your home for Alvernia Golden Wolves football, Sports Radio 1240. Matt Murphy with you alongside Bernie Nowatarski and the Alvernia head football coach, Ralph Clark. Today's matchup coming up at the top of the hour, the FDU Florham Devils. We are recording this on Thursday, Coach, but like we like to do every week and I think the fans appreciate every week, kind of going at this opponent from a broad perspective, breaking down both sides of the ball. I think that's important just to identify right off the top. So they're coming in with a couple of wins, and both teams are going to fight today for victory number 3 on the season. What should fans expect from them on offense? You mentioned in the last segment a new quarterback. It's been a couple of weeks now with a new quarterback, or 2 weeks, I believe. Double-check that. But what should they expect on offense in terms of the breakdown and just in general?
Well, they're still doing the same things that they're doing, in the pass game and stretching you laterally, sideline to sideline, and as well as vertically. They've got a big 6'6" wide receiver, senior wide receiver out there, and then on the other side they've got a big 6'3" guy. So they've got a lot of length, and those guys run very well. And they've got some talented guys at the slot as well. And then the running back is very elusive. They've changed running backs here and to the smaller, more scat back type, but he's a very tough runner. So I think that they're very capable in what they do. they've got wide splits up front, and I think that's because of their athleticism. And their linemen don't have to do as much or move as far, in the run game. Up front, they're large. They're big guys, and they're physical, and they do a good job of creating seams with those gaps and the scheme that they run. They run a lot of outside zone. And the back does a good job of picking. Just because it's outside zone doesn't necessarily mean it hits outside. He's looking to get north and south as often as possible. A lot of screen game, bubbles, RPO. Our back end, second and third level is going to have to play very disciplined to have some success. And then their tempo. They're going to snap the ball a lot. They want to run a lot of plays in the game, and they want to get in the end zone as quickly as possible. Overall, if you look at the season and we look at every game, and then they're about a 75% pass team, 75% pass to 25% run, and that's if they're not behind, and they've been behind the last couple of weeks, so they're more of an 80% pass team in those spots. But I think they'd love to be 65 to 70% pass and up tempo and run the ball probably 20 times a game, and then and throw the ball probably 50 to 60 times a game.
Bernie, what does everything Coach just said, what sticks out to you? To me, maybe the screen game, defending bubble screens and things like that in this one?
Defending the screen. And until the one that they broke last week, I had thought we had gotten progressively better on breaking the screens up, which early in the season we seemed to have a little bit of trouble with. And I still am not sure how that kid got away on the one on Saturday, because I thought he was hemmed in.
We had a misfit.
That may have come down to
down.
Missing a tackle here and there. But what really comes to my mind is the reverse. Is this is probably again where our offense wants to be very methodical, long drives, use the clock up, and keep a high paced or a fast paced offense off the field. If you can keep them off the field, that they can't throw it, or that they can't get 80, 90 plays in. That's your best defense is your offense being on the field longer. And just being a secondary guy with coming up against a team that passes that much, I would tell my D-backs to see the play start and then get your eyes out of the backfield and get to your zones or your man and worry about that and don't peek. I mean, till a running back or a quarterback crosses the line of scrimmage, once the ball snapped, you don't got to worry about what they're doing back there. Get your eyes out of the backfield and play your zone or play your man, and then come up when it's time.
He's Bernie Nowatarski. I'm Matt Murphy. We're talking with Alvernia football coach Ralph Clark here on the Alvernia Football Coaches Show, leading up to kickoff today between the Golden Wolves of Alvernia and the Devils of FDU Florham. It looks like this is their last game of the season because they didn't have a bye week at all. Yeah. So I didn't even realize that was something we'd be looking at this week, but this is it for them. This is Senior Day, Military Appreciation Day apparently, but the Senior Day emotions for them, and they're going to leave it all out in the field because they don't have another game the following week. So that's something to consider heading into this one.
It's something to consider, and it's something you have to be aware of when you're going to play them, because they're going to, like you said, they're going to let it all hang out. Yeah. So you're going to see every gadget they have. You're going to see every formation. They're going to come out in an unbalanced. They're going to come out and in funky formations. They're going to do flea flickers. They're going to have reverses and reverse passes. And this is why we talk to our kids about discipline. They're going to do those things because they want to win. And I told our team, hey, you're looking in the mirror when you look at this thing. They play hard. They play 60 minutes of football, win, lose, or draw, and they play to win. So it should be a very interesting game. I'm sure they're very confident in their capabilities, and they feel like they've missed a couple opportunities. But you look at it, and they put points on the board. They put points on the board every week. So we're going to have to be very disciplined and very and have great eye discipline and play with great patience.
Speaking of flea flickers, you guys had one last week, right?
Did we?
It caught me by surprise a little bit, I will say that. But flipping it to the defensive side of the ball for FDU, what's their mentality there? What are they known for, at least this season?
Well, I mean, they're tough. I don't want to say basic. I'd say they haven't pressured much, but I expect them to come after us up front. When they played Albright, they pressured a lot. And that's something that was out of character for them. I expect them to do the same to us. But they're very sound. The kids play hard. They're very disciplined, very physical at the point of attack with their D-line. They had the 2 big D tackles in there, and then they're pretty athletic at their ends. And then the linebacker core, they understand the fits. They have a great understanding of defensive football. They do a great job fitting and playing with great discipline. So on the back end, a few changes that they have the last week or two. A really long young corner that they have, and rangy, and does a great job breaking up and being disciplined back there. So really, really talented team, and that's what we see from them. And they're gritty. So defensively, that's what you're going to see. You're going to see a very gritty team in a 4-man front and playing some quarters back there, and just trying to keep everything in front of them on the back end, and then playing very physical, trying to beat you to the point of attack up front.
And their head coach, Brian Surace, comes from a football coaching tree. His father, Bob, at Princeton. His brother, a longtime high school coach at Millville. One of the backs in the last game was from Millville on the other team.
That's switched. His brother's the coach at Princeton, and his dad was at Millville. Yeah,
makes sense. That would make more sense that the father is no longer. Got you. There you go. But how does he kind of have his imprint on what their identity? You just spoke about offense and defense. Where do you see his fingerprints? Obviously, all over those sides of the ball.
Well, Brian's always been. I coached with Brian at Northeastern, so Brian's always been a spread it out type of coach, and he's. The offense that they're running right now, it screams Brian Surace all over it. With great offensive line play, Brian's a really good offensive line coach, and really really talented up front, and very skilled and sound up front on their offensive line. So that's a staple. And then you wanting to spread it out and spread your defense out from sideline to sideline. They're going to try to get you the really wide splits of the receivers, and get you get your linebackers out of the box, and they're going to try to win with numbers. And get you in the numbers game.
Both of you guys can jump in here. What goes into? I don't know if either of you have ever coached it for a season or anything by itself, but what goes into being a good offensive line coach? Like,
I don't want to coach offensive line, man.
What makes like a good offensive line coach though? Because you think it's the concepts are relatively simple.
No, I would say that's actually absolutely not right.
They're a whole different breed.
Yeah.
To begin with. You've got to play smart. I mean, there's a lot more to the mental game of the offensive line than most people think.
Myself included.
They're usually the smartest guys in the room. Really, I'm being honest with you. There's a lot to grasp conceptually.
Yeah, okay. There is a lot to grasp, and then you've got to have. You really need to have a mean streak to play. I mean. And you know what's funny?
I was talking more about the coaching. The coach.
Well, even the coach,
they got to be. They got to have a command about them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whether when an O-line coach, when a good O-line coach walks in the room, you know it. I mean, I'm serious. He's a guy that commands the room.
This is what we were trying to get at.
There's a stiff chin. There's a look, and they're just. It's a little different, and the players themselves have to have a mean streak that. And I mean, some of my close relationships that I've made over the years with huge linemen, 6'6", 380, and off the field they are as mild and gentle as can be, but on the field they get nasty, and that usually trickles down from who's coaching them.
Yeah. See, there we go. That was the explanation I was looking for. I didn't mean to offend any offensive line coaches out there by calling it simple or whatever. I don't want anybody mad at me the way you guys just described it.
I coached with a guy named Elliot Uzelak, and he would be very offended if you said that.
We might have to. Maybe we'll cut that out post-production, the benefits of recording this during the week.
You said that, mild-mannered off the field and just probably a lion on the – Elliot, that's Elliot. And if you don't know who he was, he's one of Bo Schembechler's – when you look at Michigan and O-line play, he was O-line coach at Michigan for a long time, head coach at Western Michigan and Naval Academy. And Elliot is probably one of the nicest guys to sit down and talk with. But, boy, I tell you, he's baritone. He's from up there in Indiana, Gary, Indiana, and he's got a mean streak, man. But very fundamentally sound.
They're
really
also
smart
very
guy.
helpful if you happen to go out after a game and you're with the offense and defensive linemen. They tend to protect very well.
pretty, yeah.
There you go.
Especially of their coaches.
Yeah.
We've got to squeeze another break in, and then we will wrap up with Coach Clark, and then we'll get Bernie's keys to the game today after that for today's game against FDU Florham. But you're listening to the Alvernia Football Coaches Show across the Jacob Media Sports Radio Network right here on Sports Radio 1240, your home for Alvernia Golden Wolves. Winding down on the Alvernia Football Coaches Show across the Jacob Media Sports Radio Network on Sports Radio 1240. Matt Murphy, Bernie Nowatarski, and Alvernia head football coach Ralph Clark. We've got another 12 o'clock kickoff today. We're pre-recording, obviously, but the game today rolling at 12. And you just mentioned, Coach, during a break, actually, as we record, that this is the third 12 o'clock start in a row. So before we wind down with some community involvement with your Golden Wolves, what's your stance on the 12 o'clock start, or are you happy to be done with it, or you kind of like it at times?
I'm happy to be done with it, man. I'm not a fan of it. You know, it knocks the kids out of whack, gets them off a routine. They got to get up earlier, I'm more so for the kids. You know, for me, it doesn't matter. You know, I can go anytime, but with
except
the
Fridays,
kids,
you didn't like the Friday game.
No, I can't say I'm not a fan of that. The Friday night.
That's
thing.
high school night.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Friday night thing or the Thursday night thing for that matter. And so.
Well, you were a fan of the Friday this year with the W at Gallaudet. That was a fun night.
We will take wins however they come, man.
Doesn't matter when they start, when they finish.
Exactly, but the noon start is it's too early and it gets off schedule. I'd rather have a little bit more time, have a little more unwind time. The kids have a little bit more time to get themselves ready and prepared to go.
And Bernie, I want to take this time to kind of wrap up. It's Week 9, the Week 9 edition of the Coaches Show. We've got a Week 9 matchup on the field coming up in this MAC conference game with FDU and Alvernia. Today, the visitor, the Golden Wolves. But the involvement in the community of the Golden Wolves with a program that you and Coach had a hand in. You brought the idea in, and the players have been involved over the last number of weeks. So let's start with the basics for anybody who maybe hasn't heard us talk about it a couple times on the show or on the broadcasts. What's the organization, and what have you guys have done with it this year?
It's the Olivets Boys and Girls Club, which is national, but we have 5 clubs here in Reading, and they asked me to come in and revamp their sports program, starting with the Flag League. So I basically had about 10 days to get it organized, and the first thought came to my mind is to talk to Coach and see if, first of all, if there was any possibility of playing on their field.
Which you did, and we will talk about.
Well, what came out of it, we couldn't use their turf field for every game, but they gave us the ability to go to a field very close to the one Olivets club, and we got to use that field for the regular season games. And what Coach then also we did along with Bill Stiles, the AD, is the players were coming to each game and being our refs and being involved with the kids from a community service aspect, that if the kids need hours, the players here need hours for community service, they could get them with me doing the refereeing of the games and being with the kids. And we played all October, and this past Tuesday we had the 7 to 9-year-old division and the 10 to 12-year-old division championship games. And boys and girls were playing co-ed. I didn't like the idea that the girls were kept out. So nice. We played our championship games here in the stadium this past Tuesday because it was election day and the kids had off school in the Reading district. And we had 2 really good championship games. Reading Rec, which isn't one of our clubs, went undefeated and won the young kids division. And our Clinton club won 12-6 over the Oak Brook club. And
is that an upset? Like
no, it was a good, really well played game. And I will tell you the best player on the field was a girl who was their quarterback, who at any given time was throwing the ball 30, 35 yards downfield.
Nice. Flag football is a lot of fun.
They did a really good job. The coaches that are volunteers at the Olivets really did a good job with the kids. It was my first endeavor with it, so I was real pleased. And my next one is trying to get the basketball league going, and I already spoke with Coach Miller here about possibly having the basketball players run a little clinic for our kids, maybe, and possibly maybe championship games being played in the building here. And also, I got a lacrosse goal out of the deal as well. So they had an old lacrosse goal sitting outside. And on Tuesday, I asked Bill Stiles if anybody wants that lacrosse goal. He said, please get rid of it. So I picked up a lacrosse goal for my son to be able to practice. And to me, it's a great partnership. And it came from starting here with this. And, the first thing that came to my mind was to talk to Coach Clark. And he was like, you want our guys to work with kids? Absolutely. So it was a really good partnership. And as I sent them a thank you letter, I hope it's for seasons to come.
Bill Stiles, of course, the Alvernia athletic director. Any refs stand out to you? I know last week Sean Carney got in the game, and then Jalen Harry got in the game, and you said, oh, that's one of my refs. And at the time, it didn't register in my head what you were talking about.
Yeah, Jordan was there. I mean, there were a whole lot of the guys. They were real personable.
That's awesome.
I will say one thing. I don't know if you noticed it, Coach, but while I was setting up the field and we were starting to get the games ready to play, your kicker was out on the field by himself for almost an hour and a half practicing kicks.
Yeah, Ryan. That's one of the things I told you. He's been such a great addition to the team. His energy, his positive attitude, his work ethic, his commitment to the program, his buy-in. It's unquestionable.
He's gotten much better. I mean, to walk on the field that first time to kick in his first football game ever, to where he is right now, he's gotten much better. But I watched him for almost an hour and a half by himself out there kicking.
That's Ryan Long. Coach, you talking about Ryan Long, the kicker here at Alvernia, and that's Coach Ralph Clark as we're winding down here on the Alvernia Football Coaches Show. Final thoughts, Coach. What does it mean to have your guys involved with something that Bernie just described?
Well, you always want the guys giving back, and you want them learning something that's not just X's and O's, not in football. And, we always tell parents through the recruiting process, you're going to drop your young man off here as a young adult, and he's going to leave a grown man. He's going to leave here an adult. And he's going to be a man, and he's going to be able to handle himself and carry himself as a man. And one of the things that you have to do as a man, when you think about later on in life, is, whether it's being a boss or being a supervisor or being the head of household, you got to understand that you're not the most important person. That it's about taking care of someone else and servicing someone else, and that's really what life is about, is serving others. And so we require that our guys do community service. We want our guys to understand that, and we started from day one when they come here, so that they really understand and take pride in that service. And I believe our guys, the more that they serve, they start to enjoy it more. And that's something that's hard to get an 18-year-old to understand, because especially in this day and age, whether it's the what have you done for me lately or what can you do for me age, having them understand that it's not about them. It's about, you can have true joy from serving someone else, from making someone else happy and putting someone else first. So we want our kids to understand that, and that's part of the growth process, and that's part of being a teammate as well. So that's what we want our kids to get from it, and that's what it means to us. It's not about the recognition because we don't put out there, other than us mentioning it right here, we don't even put it out on social media. It's what we do. It's who we are. So it's not something that we need to broadcast.
That's that old saying, do the things when nobody's looking.
Character,
Exactly.
John Wooden, characters who you are when no one's watching. There you have it. Well said, Coach. Well said, Bernie, and great job out there in the community. That will do it for this week's Coaches Show, but don't go anywhere because coming up next, Bernie's Keys to the Game and kickoff between Alvernia and FDU Florham across the Jacob Media Sports Radio Network right here on Sports Radio 1240, your home for Alvernia Golden Wolves football.